You won't believe what happened that warm evening on the porch. I thought it would be just another quiet night, feet up, breeze in my hair, a glass of iced tea in my hand. But then he sat beside me, my cousin, and with one sentence he shattered everything I thought I knew about my life, my choices, and myself. From which cities are you watching us tonight? Drop it in the comments. I love knowing where our little stories are reaching hearts. Now let me take you back to that unforgettable night. The sun had just dipped below the trees, painting the sky in those soft watercolor streaks of orange and pink that always made me pause. I was on the porch as I usually was at that hour, my little escape from the hum of chores and the steady rhythm of the clock. I had the cushions fluffed on the old wooden swing and a fresh pitcher of lemon iced tea sweating beside me. I didn't expect anyone. That's why I was surprised when I saw Min, my cousin, walking up the gravel path with his usual slow, thoughtful stride. He was younger than me by 10 years, maybe a bit more, but we'd always had a quiet understanding, like two souls who didn't need to fill every silence. "Evening, Lon," he said, the corners of his mouth pulling into that half-smile he always wore. "Min," I nodded, nudging the cushion beside me. "Didn't think I'd see you today." He settled in beside me without a word, sighing softly as the swing creaked under our weight. For a moment we didn't speak. Just the chirping of the crickets and the occasional distant bark filled the air. I glanced at him from the corner of my eye. His expression was calm, but something about his eyes. They weren't settled. "Long day?" I finally asked. He chuckled quietly, rubbing a hand through his short, dark hair. "You could say that, but I needed to get out of my head for a bit. And for some reason I ended up here." "Well," I said, reaching for the extra glass I always kept handy. "You've come to the right porch. We serve truth with a splash of lemon." He laughed again, this time louder, fuller. I liked hearing it. It made the place feel lighter. We talked for a while about the usual things. His work, the old house he was slowly restoring, memories from when we were younger, when family picnics were noisy, and my hair hadn't turned silver yet. And then the conversation drifted. "Do you ever think?" He began staring out at the darkening yard, "that maybe we're all just pretending. Like we convince ourselves this is the life we wanted just because it's the life we ended up with." I turned to look at him fully. The question hung heavy in the air, and I felt my heartbeat slow, more often than I'd like to admit. He nodded like he expected that answer. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "You always seem so sure, Lon. So content even when things went wrong." My throat tightened. It wasn't a compliment. It was a quiet observation, and one that pressed against my ribs. "I got good at smiling," I said. "You learn that when the people around you expect it." I figured if I kept the garden tidy and the dinners warm, no one would ask why my eyes looked tired. He didn't say anything, but I felt his attention shift. He was listening in a way most people don't. Really listening. I stayed in a marriage that made me feel invisible. I continued softly. "I did the things I was supposed to do, Min. Played my part. And now that it's all quiet, I don't even know who I am outside of it." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Lon, I always admired you. I just never knew you felt alone." I smiled at him, gentle, sad. That's the funny thing about being strong. People assume you don't need anyone. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he reached out just lightly and put his hand over mine where it rested on the armrest. Not urgent, not invasive, just warm, familiar. I didn't pull away. "I came here because I needed to talk to someone who wouldn't think I was losing it," he said. "And maybe because I missed you, the real you. Not the family version, just Lon." Something in me shifted at those words. I wasn't expecting it, but they touched a part of me that hadn't been touched in a long time. The part that remembered who I used to be before I became someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's sister, just Lon. "Then maybe," I said quietly, "we're both here for the same reason." His thumb brushed gently across the back of my hand. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't inappropriate. It was honest, comforting. And in that small, unexpected moment, sitting on the porch with the man who had known me since childhood, I realized that clarity doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it's a simple sentence, a quiet presence, a shared silence that feels safe. The porch swing creaked again as we leaned back, watching the stars begin to blink awake. Neither of us spoke for a while. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been felt. But something had changed, and I knew the next time I looked in the mirror, I'd see myself a little differently. The next morning, the sun filtered softly through the kitchen window, casting warm streaks of gold across the linoleum floor. I stood by the sink, staring out at the dew-covered lawn, my hands wrapped around a warm cup of coffee. But I wasn't really seeing the yard. My mind was still on the porch on Min. On the way, his words had unsettled something deep inside me. I hadn't slept much, not because of anxiety or discomfort, but because something had shifted, and I couldn't stop turning it over in my mind. The way he looked at me, not with pity but recognition, like he had peeled back a layer I didn't even know was there. We'd always had a bond, Min and I. But that night had revealed something more honest than I was used to. Something more personal than our usual family conversations. It wasn't romantic, at least not in the obvious sense. It was emotional, real, and strangely comforting. By midday, I found myself checking the driveway, half expecting him to return. He didn't, and I told myself that was for the best. Still, when the late afternoon air began to cool, I found myself back on the porch. Same swing, same glass of iced tea. Creature of habit, I guess. I was mid-sip when I heard the familiar crunch of tires on gravel. My stomach fluttered, a reaction I hadn't felt in years. I stood, brushing invisible dust from my skirt as Min stepped out of his truck. He looked unsure for a moment, like he was testing the water. "I brought you something," he said, holding up a small brown paper bag. "Fresh peach pie from the diner." I smiled despite myself. "Bribing your way back onto the porch?" He grinned. "Something like that." We settled in again, the pie between us, its sweet smell mixing with the earthy scent of the approaching evening. He handed me a fork, and for a while we ate quietly, stealing bites and stealing glances. "Did you think about last night?" he finally asked, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Yes," I replied softly. "More than I expected to." He nodded slowly, like he knew exactly what I meant. "I wasn't trying to make things complicated," he said after a beat. I've been carrying things around and sitting here with you. It felt like I could let some of it out without pretending. That's exactly how I felt." I admitted. "It's strange, isn't it? You go through life doing what you think is right, staying inside the lines, and then one honest moment can make you question whether any of it felt like you." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back, his arm draped casually along the back of the swing, not touching me, just near enough to feel. There was that silence again, but now it felt like its own kind of language between us. "Do you remember when we were kids?" he said. "And you used to sneak me cookies from Aunt Miriam's tin when she wasn't looking." I laughed, the sound catching me off guard. "Of course. She never figured out it was me." "She did," he smirked. "She just let you get away with it," she said. Lan's got mischief in her eyes, but kindness in her hands. That made me pause. I hadn't thought of that in years, and hearing it now from him felt like someone was handing me back a piece of myself I'd forgotten. "I missed that version of you," Min added, almost in a whisper. "The one who took chances, who didn't care if the rules bent a little." I turned to face him, our eyes meeting in the dimming light. "She's still in there," I said. "I think I just forgot how to let her out." He didn't smile this time. He just looked at me, really looked. And in that gaze, I felt something more than nostalgia. I felt seen. And suddenly I became aware of how close we were. The soft brush of his knee against mine. The way the breeze lifted a strand of my hair, only for him to gently tuck it back behind my ear without saying a word. That touch, brief and delicate, sent a shiver down my spine. Not of fear or confusion, but something quietly thrilling. I searched his face for hesitation, for doubt, for any sign that this moment wasn't what I thought it was becoming. But there was only tenderness, respect, and something unspoken that made my heart beat faster than it had in a long time. "Lon," he said my name like it was something precious. "I know how this looks. But I'm not here to stir up anything messy. I've spent so many years holding back words I should have said. And last night reminded me that silence is a kind of prison too." I placed my hand gently over his on the swing. It felt warm, steady, familiar in the most unfamiliar way. "I'm not afraid of complicated," I said quietly. "I'm afraid of never feeling anything real again." That was the moment everything changed. Not because of a kiss or a confession, but because the space between us was finally honest, and that honesty, however fragile, was more powerful than anything I'd felt in years. The sun dipped further behind the trees, casting a soft glow over the yard. And as we sat there, hands lightly entwined, I realized that the world hadn't ended. It had just opened quietly, gently, like a window I hadn't realized was stuck, and I was finally ready to breathe. The following days passed in a haze of thoughts and stolen glances. Min didn't come by every day, but when he did, it felt like the air changed, like the porch, the yard, even the way the light hit the wooden railing was somehow more alive. I told myself not to read into it, not to let my mind wander too far. But my heart didn't listen. It wasn't about romance. Not exactly. It was about being seen, heard. It was about waking up to the realization that someone had been watching you all along. Not with judgment or expectation, but with quiet understanding. I had lived 60 years, many of them full. I'd raised children, buried loved ones, held steady through storms I didn't think I could survive. But nothing had prepared me for this strange, delicate blooming in my chest. One afternoon, I stood in the garden pruning the rose bushes that had grown wild this summer. The thorns scratched at my gloves, but I didn't mind. The rhythm of it calmed me. I was so lost in thought that I didn't hear Min's truck until it crunched to a stop behind me. "You always did love those roses," he said, his voice warm behind me. I turned, brushing a loose curl from my cheek. "They're stubborn like me." He grinned and walked over, his sleeves rolled up, arms already dusted with flour. "I made cobbler. Thought you might like a taste test." Well, how could I say no to that? We ended up in the kitchen, side by side, plates and forks in hand. The cobbler was sweet, a little tart, and exactly what I didn't know I'd been craving. We talked and laughed, our movements easy, like we'd done this 100 times before. And then came the quiet again, that same heavy stillness that seemed to follow us. He set his plate down and leaned against the counter. "Lon, can I ask you something?" I looked up. Of course. "Why didn't you ever leave?" I didn't need him to explain. I knew what he meant. Why hadn't I left the marriage that left me feeling so empty? Why had I stayed through the cold silences, the quiet resentments, the years that stretched without affection? I sighed, walking to the window. The light was soft now, filtering through the trees like memory, because I thought leaving would mean I failed. I said after a long moment, I thought if I just tried harder, gave more, prayed longer, maybe things would change. And by the time I realized they wouldn't, I was already too tired to start over. He came closer, standing beside me but not crowding me. "You didn't fail. You survived. That's different." I looked at him, then really looked. His face was open, eyes gentle, voice steady. He wasn't saying it to flatter me. He believed it. "And now?" he asked. Now I paused, then smiled faintly. "Now I think maybe surviving isn't enough. Maybe I want to feel alive again." His breath caught just slightly, and then his hand found mine. This time not in passing. This time with intention. "Can I tell you something I've never said out loud?" he asked. "Yes." He turned toward me, his voice quieter now. "When I was younger, I used to watch you at family gatherings, not in a childish crush kind of way, but with admiration. You were the one who brought light into the room. You were the one who laughed with your whole chest. You made people feel at ease. And even when I got older, that never changed." I felt my throat tighten, emotions tangled together. Gratitude, disbelief, grief for all the years I hadn't seen myself through those eyes. "I don't know what this is between us," he continued. "And I'm not trying to name it too quickly. But I do know that being near you makes me feel more like myself. And I haven't felt that in a long time." I turned to face him, tears brimming but not falling. "You make me feel like I'm allowed to be seen." He reached up, brushing a thumb gently along my cheek, tracing the line just beneath my eye. "You deserve more than being seen. You deserve to be cherished." My heart thudded steady, certain. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. The closeness, the raw honesty, it was more intimate than any physical touch. It was a soul-level connection, quiet and profound. Later that evening, we sat back on the porch, watching the stars emerge. The swing moved gently beneath us, and our shoulders brushed now and then like reminders that we were real, that this was happening. He spoke of his past, his regrets, the things he wished he'd done differently. And I listened not as someone judging, but as someone who had lived through her own quiet regrets. And when I told him about the version of me that once wrote poetry, that once dreamed of traveling, that once painted watercolors in the attic, he didn't just listen. He asked questions. He wanted to know who I was beneath the ears. "I want to see those paintings," he said. "The real ones. They're terrible. I laughed. Even better, he smiled. And in that moment, surrounded by the scent of honeysuckle and the soft hum of crickets, I realized something. It wasn't about rewriting my life or chasing something wild. It was about rediscovering the parts of myself I had buried under duty, expectation, and time. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I felt like I was finally walking toward it. The morning after our quiet porch conversation, I woke up differently. Not in a dramatic movie-like way, but in the small, powerful way that change really happens. I moved slower, more present. I caught myself humming in the kitchen. My fingers lingered a little longer over the old watercolor brushes in the drawer I hadn't opened in years. Something in me had stretched, softened, opened. That afternoon I found myself standing at the bottom of the attic stairs, heart pounding for no reason other than the memories that lived up there. Dust, cobwebs, old trunks, and pieces of the woman I used to be. I climbed slowly, each creaking step a whisper from the past. The attic smelled like cedar and time. I opened the old trunk and there they were. Sketchbooks, loose canvas sheets, faded journals. I hadn't painted in almost 20 years, not seriously. But as I sat there flipping through pages of colors and half-finished dreams, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long. Ownership. Not of a house or a role or a responsibility, but of myself. Min arrived just after sunset. I hadn't told him to come, but I think he knew. We had that kind of rhythm now, unspoken, intuitive. He knocked softly on the frame of the open door. "You painting ghosts up there?" I smiled. Maybe just exercising a few. He climbed the attic stairs and joined me on the floor, cross-legged like we were kids again. I handed him a sketchbook and he flipped through it carefully like it was something sacred. "These are beautiful," he said. "You saw things in ways others didn't." "I used to," I replied. Then life happened. I started seeing everything through other people's eyes. He didn't respond right away. He just sat there, the golden attic light casting shadows across his face, turning him from a man I'd always known into someone entirely new. After a moment he said, "Do you want to try again? Painting, I mean living just for you." The question took my breath for a second. It was so simple, so direct, so terrifying. "I think I do," I whispered. "But it feels strange starting at this age, like I've missed the train, and I'm just standing at the station waving." Min looked over at me, and something softened in his expression. "Maybe the train's been waiting for you. Maybe you just had to be ready to board it." The tears came then, quiet and unannounced, not from sadness but from release, from someone finally giving me permission I hadn't realized I was waiting for. I looked at him, really looked, and I saw the man behind the cousin, the soul who had listened without fixing, stood beside me without leaning too close, offered kindness without conditions. "Min," I said carefully, searching for the right words. "What is this between us?" He reached for my hand again, familiar now, grounding. "It's not something I can label. I just know that when I'm with you I feel like I've come home. And I don't mean the porch or the house or the pie. I mean you." I laughed gently through a tear. "You're going to make me believe in second chances." "Maybe it's not a second chance," he said. "Maybe it's just the first real one." The attic fell into stillness, except for the low creak of the boards beneath us and the soft evening wind rattling the windows. We didn't need more words. That moment said enough. Over the next few weeks, things didn't change in the flashy way. There were no grand confessions, no whispered promises of forever. Instead, there were cups of coffee shared in the early morning, brushes dipped in color again, and laughter echoing through a house that had been too quiet for too long. Min didn't try to save me, and I didn't try to be someone I wasn't. We just met in the middle, two people who had lived full, complicated lives, discovering that connection doesn't always look like the movies. Sometimes it looks like peach cobbler in the kitchen and two folding chairs in a backyard at dusk. Sometimes it's just someone saying your name in a way that reminds you you're still here. And one night, as we sat side by side again on the porch, no swing this time, just two chairs and the sound of cicadas, he reached over, took my hand in his and said, "Lon, wherever this leads, I'm glad we found our way here." And I, a woman who had once forgotten how to dream, finally understood. It's never too late to be known. It's never too late to start again. And sometimes the love we need most doesn't knock loud. It just quietly sits beside us until we're ready to notice.